thing in our city. And there's a lot going on
Yeah, a
in
lot going
our
on.
city.
Yeah.
So thank you for taking time.
Sure.
I know that there was a debate on last night. I unfortunately was not there, but there's lots of content on social media. But we're so grateful that you're here on Boston Praise Radio on
Yep.
TV Network.
Yeah.
Our
Amen.
own, you're not a stranger here. And this is Boston's only Black-owned, church-based multimedia platform. So a lot of times people, I don't know, may think that commercial media or mainstream, I call it commercial because this is grassroots and people have an opportunity to be able to engage. And this is our own media.
That's right.
So we appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
So we're going to jump right into
We're
it.
ready to rock and roll?
Let's do it. So
Let's do it.
Okay. So looking back on this, on your time as district attorney, what accomplishments are you most proud of and what would you do differently if reelected?
So I think that a number of things proud of. I'm one of the first things that I've been saying from the very start is our interest in expanding the scope and territory around community engagement. Historically, in the past, the office has had sort of one person that's sort of designated as the community engagement person who does that work.
Mm-hmm.
We committed to a community engagement team that's not only doing the work, but also making sure that they're building the scaffolding and the structure that pushes the entire office out into the community. And so we have been engaging with the community like never before. We've had a number of very successful programs like Services Over Sentences. Right down the street in Dorchester District Court, we launched our Emerging Adult Program, built diversion program for the 18 to 25-year-old cachet, and built off of our Juvenile Alternative Resolution Program. So there's a lot of different things that we've done. We've expanded the number and size of the employees that were in the office. When I first got to the office, staffing was way down. We got about 40 more people in the office now than we had before. We've been able to raise their salaries significantly. We've done some pretty incredible work, obviously, around dealing with driving down cycles of violence. Homicides have been at an all-time low. Shootings have been at an all-time low. We've had a particular focus on addressing shootings, non-fatal shootings, particularly if they're unsolved, in a very comprehensive way that I think's made an extraordinary difference.
Can you elaborate on some of those ways that you have expanded upon? Particularly, you mentioned lastly the unsolved homicides.
Yeah. So our Crime Strategies Bureau they have a number of different focuses, but the one that I'm just referring to now and speaking about is focusing on shootings that are non-fatal, whether solved or unsolved, because that is we know, based on data statistics, we know that that's a number that can drive a lot of other things. And if we can get that number down, then we can be more successful. And I think that's a big reason why we've seen one of the big reasons we've seen such a drop in shootings and violent crime across the city over the last couple of years. So the Crime Strategies Bureau has kind of made it their mission to try to get that number down to 100 or less. They've come close. They haven't gotten there yet, but they've gone a long way from where we used to be. So last year, our number of non-fatal shootings in the city was 103.
Amazing.
I can remember a time where you can remember a time.
I can indeed, unfortunately.
When and beyond, when that was our homicide rate, let alone our non-fatal shooting rate. So the strategy encompasses a lot of different things, intervention and prevention strategies, not only before shootings happen, but after as well. So anytime a shooting does happen, we want to work together with the Boston, work together with the Boston Police Department, work together with the city and trauma response teams, all collectively together to make sure that we are wrapping around individuals that are involved or we believe may be involved, so we can hopefully drive down cycles of violence, right? So those intervention and prevention strategies happen along the way before incidents happen all the time as we try to engage with our young people and make sure that they're on the right track, but then afterwards as well. So there's there's a response afterwards, and there's always the work that goes on before as well. And then the other key component of that is working on the non-fatals that are unsolved. So our clearance rate on unsolved shootings is higher than it's ever been before. I'm not gonna, somewhere between 45 and 50%, I would think, is where the clearance rate is. That's unheard of. And that 103 shootings in the last year, non-fatal shootings in the last year, was the lowest ever in recorded history. And we're on track for that again this year. So despite some of the recent violence that we've seen, we continue to work day in and day out on making sure that we're doing the work. We don't rise and fall in the numbers as much as maybe the media does. We're doing it 24/7 no matter what. And we want to make sure that every corner of our communities are safe. You hear all the time, and I think Brother Randy Muhammad was in the paper a couple days ago in an article, which I'm guessing you might have read, and he talked about whether or not he believes that Boston is in fact one of the safest major cities in the country. And he said, well, I'm not going to say that everyone feels safe, because he knows, right? He's got the experience, but the numbers don't lie, right? Two things can be true at the same time.
True.
And we're committed to addressing the two truths at the same time. So while we want to continue to let the data drive us and hopefully do even better, we want to continue to do everything we can to make sure that people in every community, in every area of Boston, are able to say that they believe that they feel safe. So we're constantly working on that.
With regard to the unsolved homicides, can you speak to that? Because you mentioned prevention, and that's amazing, and I hear you. That will prevent us from having more homicides that are unsolved.
Yeah.
But
so I don't know the clearance rate on the unsolved homicide rate off the top of my head. I can get it for you.
Sure.
I don't know what it is. I do know anecdotally that our clearance rates are better than they were in the past, and it's just a logical extension of having less of them. The less homicides that you're investigating, the more time and manpower and energy that we're able to put into solving those cases. So naturally, the clearance rates go up. Some of the two of the recent homicides, the one that happened over in Hyde Park,
yes,
we made an arrest on that case, I believe, within 48 hours, and then the one that happened most recently on Blue Hill Ave, we made the arrest the same day. So we're constantly working on making sure that we're able to hold people accountable and do so as quickly as possible. Some investigations are more complex than others. Some people wonder why they take time, but there's always evidentiary reasons and witness hurdles and all those sorts of things that we have to work on and overcome in order to solve cases. So some come together quickly, and some don't.
Makes sense. Public safety, as you talked about, it remains a top concern, even with the safest city, right? There are folks that is a concern, right?
Yep.
People are carrying firearms because in many instances people don't feel safe. So what is your plan to reduce violent crime? You alluded to that, but elaborate, while ensuring fairness in the criminal justice system, that balance.
Yeah. Well, that's always important, and I've always maintained that we can achieve criminal legal reform and public safety at the same time. I think there have at times been some dangerous conversations about whether or not one has to give way to the other. That's simply not true. You can achieve both at the same time. You just need people that know how to do it and know how to achieve it. I believe that as a leader, I have a very good idea of some of the concepts around that and how to achieve it. Look, we're living proof that the two can go hand in hand. But Massachusetts has the lowest carceral footprint in the country, meaning the lowest number of people that are incarcerated in the country. And yet, and I'm not just talking about Suffolk County or Boston, Massachusetts on the whole is considered to be a very safe state to live in, right? So the notion, clearly, if we're a very safe state to live in, and yet we have the lowest carceral footprint, there's no correlation between locking people up and public safety. So we will always want to continue to advance criminal legal reform, and do the very best we can at reducing recidivism. That's really the ultimate goal. If you want to traditionally prosecute people less, your constant target that you shoot towards needs to be reducing recidivism. Because if people are not reoffending, then you're obviously dealing with less arrest, less prosecution, less people coming through the court system. So that's just generally speaking. In terms of in terms of guns, which is a major emphasis, that continues to be a persistent problem. I'm not going to lie.
Sure.
We have too many guns on the street, and I think anyone who's got any experience living with our communities has an understanding of that. So there's a lot of different factors. Carrying for protection is not a defense to carrying an illegal firearm. Illegal firearms are coming up, and we were just talking about with another group this morning. They are coming up from down south, and from other major areas into our state from across borders. The addressing of trafficking is difficult, particularly now. We're not getting a whole lot of collaboration and partnership with our federal partners, less so now than we have in the past. But we continue to do everything we can to focus on limiting the number of guns on the street. And part of that is taking them off too. I talked to another district attorney from another jurisdiction, and I can't remember which state it was. It was a year or so ago that called and wanted to spend some time talking with me because couldn't understand how our crime rates were as low as they are. And she said, well, we're concerned because there's so many guns and we're taking so many guns off the street. And I said, well, if you're taking guns off the street, that's a good thing, not a bad thing, right? So she had never looked at it from that. It was a female DA. I wish I could remember what state, but she hadn't looked at it from that perspective per se. And there were a number of things that they were strategies that we've employed that we've never given up on. They said, well, we tried A, B, and C, and then it didn't work. We moved on. And I'm like, that's in here in Suffolk and here in Boston. If we know A, B, and C is going to work and is tried and true, and we believe that it's going to be successful, we don't give up just because there's some bumps in the road. We keep going.
Many people believe that there should be a balance between accountability and rehabilitation. How do you define that balance as a prosecutor?
Yeah, I mean, how do you define it? I mean, it's necessary. There are crimes and offenses, particularly if they're in the area of repetition, where accountability is absolutely necessary. But by the same token, if there are situations where diversion and access to opportunity and resources as opposed to judicial prosecution is the way to go, then that's something we always look at. I mean, I think the best area that we can look at that in is in our services over sentences program, which is addressing the opioid epidemic and the addiction problem that we have in the city, which is now a little more spread out. It used to be centralized in what we knew as Mass and Cass. I always cringed at that name, but I don't think we need to even call it that anymore because it's spread out. But the problem, the cycles of addiction still continue. And what we have known for many, many, many years now, long time, is that we can't incarcerate ourselves out of the addiction problem. If you merely incarcerate people who have addiction problem, in many ways you just exacerbate it, right? So services over sentences is designed with a recovery first lens and focus to get people into services and into recovery and into the related aspects of access to resources they need, so they hopefully do not go out and continue to reoffend and get spiraled into the throes of addiction. So addiction is one thing, but we know that the mental health component and addiction often go hand in hand. People are self-medicating and that sort of thing. Homelessness is obviously a factor. The ability to get jobs, all these things sort of play in.
Correct.
So services over sentences program is not a one size fits all routine. We partner with a number of different organizations and try to get people into pathways of recovery. But those pathways of recovery are not just abstinence and getting sober. It's also housing. It's also mental health resources, all the things that go along with that. So that's what the Services Over Sentence is doing and providing, and I think it's making a big difference out there. And it's a slow and steady process because you're saving people one person at a time. But I think the important thing to note there is that we're literally not just changing people's lives. In some instances, we're actually saving people's lives. And so that's what we've been dedicated to doing. So there's always a balance between accountability and fairness and equity within our criminal legal system. Now, if you are one of those sharks that is preying upon those who are using drugs, then we're going to hold you accountable. If we are able to arrest you for drug distribution related offenses, human trafficking related offenses, a lot of times human trafficking intermingles with this as well. If we can hold accountable the people that are driving the problem from a availability standpoint, then we're always going to do that, and that's a difference, right? You're not gonna treat the drug dealer the same way you're gonna treat the addict. They both may get arrested, depending on the circumstances, but you have to handle those two situations very differently.
It's outstanding. So, how would you strengthen your relationship between the district attorney's office, local police departments, community organizations, and neighborhood residents?
Yeah. Well, with the neighborhood and with residents and with organizations working out there in the neighborhoods, it's through what I just talked about earlier. It's through our comprehensive community engagement strategy. And again, our community engagement team is not just doing the work themselves. They are equipping other people within the office to do it as well. And so, whether it's shop with a cop or whether it's responding to a trauma-related incident. So it was an incident right here in Mattapan recently, not too far down the road. You may remember 3 or 4 weeks ago with someone who carjacked a car and then drove it.
Yes.
That was a very tragic, unfortunate incident. And there's mental health issues entwined there too, by the way. But there was the Mattapan Health Center held a community meeting in the days after that incident, and in the days after, it wasn't about oh, we have to hold this person. We'd already made the arrest. It wasn't like, oh, we have to hold this person accountable, or oh, what are we going to do, or oh, why is this case been solved? There was none of that. It was, we know what happened. Fortunately, an arrest has been made, but nonetheless, this was a tragedy. I mean, they're just happened in the middle of the day. There were a lot of people that witnessed this, right? So the meeting, which was appropriately held by the health center, was about how do we come together as a community to heal? How do we come together as a community to help and support those who were affected by this in a holistic way? And that's anyone from the family or people that were actually there and witnessed it. When I found out about that event, I absolutely planned on being there, but I immediately called my chief of staff and person of my community engagement team and said, I didn't say I need you there, although they did come. My chief of staff came, my community engagement person came to the meeting as well. I said, we need to be there, meaning the office. And so I was running late because I was running from one event to the other. So I got to the event a little late. By the time I got there, seven people from my office were already there. So it was my chief of staff, my community engagement person, and also 5 others from the district courts in the surrounding area. Victim witness advocates and ADAs were there at the meeting to support community, to be with community, to hear what their concerns were. Because if you don't know and understand the communities you're serving, you can't possibly do a good job for them in the courtroom. So
Mhm.
those are things that we continue to do. So our community engagement team is not just out there doing the engagement themselves. They are providing the information, the strategic plan, the resources to make available for my entire office so that we can be involved in community.
Let's go to talk about accountability and transparency. I'm going to lift two high profile cases, and obviously you can't get into the details, but just the principle for there's Officer O'Malley that was really high profile, and the in terms of holding people accountable, officers, right? In terms of holding another situation when it was ruled a homicide behind the wall, Jacoby Kennedy, right? Who had some mental health challenges and so forth, holding correctional officers accountable. How will you hold accountable officers, whether they're police officers or correctional officers? And kind of, we know we have OPAT, we've got the post, and now Senator Miranda has legislation pending, coast, for correctional officers and oversight and independent bodies that would be able. So, what would be your strategy to hold officers accountable? Very practically, a person on the community can't kill someone and continue to terrorize folks. Likewise, police officers, if they're a homicide behind the wall, folks feel that they should be, held accountable, decertified, not come back, and there's a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
So, how would you hold accountable officers, whether they're correctional officers or police officers?
Yeah, so look, our office has a very different responsibility than say OPAT does, um, or Post.
Sure.
They're looking at an officer's certification,
Yeah.
whether or not they're going to continue in that certification. Obviously, that certification affects whether or not they're able to do their job or not, right? And that's a duty and responsibility that they have, that we don't get much involved in. What we do, and what we have done, in some of these more serious cases, and also less serious cases, is when it's appropriate. If a law enforcement or any person in a public position commits a crime where probable cause has been established, then they get charged, and they can be prosecuted criminally, right?
Mhm.
And that's what happened in the situation with
Yes.
Officer O'Malley.
Yes.
Collectively, the team working together, looking at all the facts and the evidence, believed there was probable cause, and arraigned that officer in district court, and then proceeded to the grand jury. That's what we do, in every circumstance. That's what we did, in the Hyde Park Ave case the other day.
Mhm.
The one that happened on Hyde Park Ave near the Dunkin' Donuts and Little Haiti there.
Yes.
Once we knew that there was probable cause to believe that person X had committed the charge,
Mhm.
we proceeded with their arraignment in district court, and now we'll go through the indictment process in superior court. That's the same process that we use in every situation. So that's with regards to Officer O'Malley. That's what happened. Now the Jacoby Kennedy case, a couple. It's almost impossible to compare the two cases.
Okay.
I mean, there are so many different distinctions there. One of it is that it's being led by the AG's office. So there was some concerns raised about whether or not we should be handling the case. Although we did not feel like we could not handle the case, we understood positions that had been advanced by CPCS and others. The Attorney General was leading that investigation. We are assisting them, but the complexity of that case is much different than a situation like Officer O'Malley. There are hundreds of witnesses with regards to what happened in the House of Corrections. There is an ME's report that, as you know, has now been finalized. It was ruled a homicide.
Correct.
But look at how long it took for that ME to make that determination,
Mhm.
as opposed to other circumstances where the ME will rule homicide within a day, 24 hours, 48 hours. So
Mhm.
And now with Jacoby Kenny, there's a question of um, whether or not there was an abuse of authority, right? Um, that situation is a lot different than the situation that we have with Officer O'Malley. And that process continues, as does the matter with Officer O'Malley. The process continues. He's
Mhm.
still presumed innocent.
Mhm.
He's been arraigned and charged, and the case is proceeding in Superior Court.
Mhm.
But it's hard to compare the two.
Yeah.
I don't know if
No,
that answers the question.
the only comparison I'm looking at was just in terms of accountability for correction for officers,
Hmm.
right? And that's from a prosecutor as a prosecutor, right? So if it's deemed a homicide,
Hmm.
right? Is that now if a person is a homicide in community, aren't they charged?
No, not necessarily. So,
Oh,
an ME's determination of homicide is very different from the legal definition of a charge that we would bring for criminality, which would be anything from involuntary manslaughter to voluntary manslaughter to second degree murder to first degree murder and other variations, right?
okay,
Um, when the ME rules a homicide, they're looking at a, a definition that has a significantly lower threshold, which is death at the hands of another.
okay,
So you can have death at the hands of another that is justified. You could have death at the hands of another that is self-defense.
okay.
Um, you could have death at the hands of another that is not criminal,
Mm-hmm.
and you could have obviously have death at the hands of another that is criminal. So when ME rules a homicide, and
Right.
this is I think classically misunderstood, um, that that's not a definition that assumes criminal liability.
Okay.
We have to make, or any district attorney's office, in conjunction with police departments and investigations, have to make a separate determination that goes to criminal liability.
So if a person is in the custody and care of the Suffolk County House of Correction, waiting pre-trial and doesn't have the resources to get out and has known to have some mental illness and you're in shackles and the custody and care and it's deemed in fact a homicide, I'm trying to understand how in any way, shape, or form that can be like justified or other variables help. I mean, let's again educate me and educate the public because
Yeah, I mean, every situation is different. Without knowing the specific facts of the situation, um, it would be hard for me to know that. So if it, you have self defense as a defense in any sort of situation, potentially any sort of situation where there is a homicide. So were the corrections officers in this case acting in self defense? I don't know.
okay,
Um, uh, I doubt it based upon what I do know, but also did they exceed the scope of their authority in you know detaining or someone who was unruly? I don't know that either. That's the process that's going on with the AG's office right now. It would be um, difficult, and also probably inappropriate for me to comment much more than that.
okay, okay,
But that's the investigation
okay,
that's ongoing.
okay. I guess okay. So I'll just leave that alone. So um, uh, again, transparency, right, and accountability is a thing that is like really important that people are asking for. So, what are the factors that what would be your protocols and things that you would put in place that people would feel, uh, uh, transparency and accountability under your leadership as a district attorney?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a pretty wide open ended question. Let's see if I can and I'll narrow it a bit. I'll put it within the context of the Officer O'Malley case. So
Okay,
it is because
a lot
there
of
has been a cry for it to see the video in the case.
correct.
The video is evidence.
Hmm.
The video is now evidence of in a case that we are criminally prosecuting with some pretty serious charges. Um, and we as prosecutors always have to be um, mindful of the proper administration of justice. understanding the need for transparency.
Yep.
I can understand why people are curious, but we made a determination at a relatively early stage to bring the charge, and then to go to the grand jury and to release evidence in the case. Any evidence would be inappropriate. I would never want to be so collectively through a process that involves a lot of people, both within the Boston Police Department and my office. And I understand that I am the leader and ultimately the final decision maker, but we determined to bring that charge. And now we have a case that's proceeding. That was a difficult decision, but I've said this before in other contexts. We make these sorts of difficult decisions every day.
Sure.
I think that's something that people need to be mindful of. There are situations, we've had a couple just this week where I told you we made arrests. Every situation where someone has, we believe, and we are alleging is criminally responsible for the death of another, those are always hard decisions. So we're making those decisions every day. In conjunction with that, we have to be mindful of our judicial process, and of evidence, how it's shared, when it's shared. In this particular context, we have obviously turned it over to the defense, and we have shown it to the family, the survivors of Mr. Stevenson King, because we believe and we know that that's appropriate.
Sure.
From there, you put yourselves in my shoes for a second. I don't ever want to be, and I don't think any district attorney wanted to be the person who had to explain to the Stevenson King or any other family in a similar context, yeah, we now can't go forward with the case, or we have to go forward with the case in a somewhat detrimental fashion because we released evidence to the greater public than we shouldn't have. And then the court said the evidence is being thrown out or whatever, something to that nature, right? So we have an obligation to the court and to the process. That also extends to the right of the accused as well. In this case, the accused is a police officer, but in many other cases, the accused is not, is a civilian person. And we don't turn over all our evidence to the public to see for that in those cases either, for the same reason. We have to do the job of making sure that we're able to ensure justice in that case. That includes being able to deliver justice for the family, and for the community at large who has an interest in the case, the rights of the defendant, but also our ability to be able to fairly and impartially select a jury. If every person in the world has seen the video prior to the trial, then that makes it harder for us to be able to get unbiased, independent jurors. So we're mindful of all these contexts within our criminal legal system as we're making that decision. And in this case, we haven't turned it over, and at this point, a judge has ordered that it be impounded and not turned over until the trial.
If reelected, what would be your top 3 priorities during your first 100 days in your new reelection?
Yeah, I'll be frank with you. I don't know if I've ever necessarily thought about it in that particular context, because the next 100 days will be following after the 365 days and the 365 days and 365 days before that. We want to continue to do the job that we are doing. We want to continue to make sure that we are advancing justice in a fair and equitable way. We want to make sure that we're continuing to balance the between criminal legal reform and accountability. We want to continue to expand as well as we've done. We want to continue to expand on our community engagement efforts. and we want to make sure that we continue to keep our violent crime rates at a historical low. Throw the safest major city uh, context out of the window, because that seems to somehow create controversy for people. But we want to continue to keep our crime rates at the historical lows that we're now seeing, and we're going to work in every way that we can continue to do that. There are some things internally within the office that we're continuing to do. Like I mentioned before, we needed more staff. We want to have more attorneys on hand. We want to be able to pay them more money. That affects morale and people's ability to want to do the job and continue in the job. We've been very successful in that respect. When I started in the office, starting salary for an ADA was $62,500. Now it's $76,000. We've worked very hard with our legislators and with our other people in government to come to the notion, understanding, and realization that our public servants that are doing the hard work in court every day deserve to be paid more. We're doing a lot around evidence management so that we can make sure that we are getting evidence to the defense in these cases in a timely and proper fashion. So there's a lot of things from an organizational structure that we're working on just to continue to improve upon the office. Our work is never done. We're always trying to improve. We're always trying to get better.
What would you say to voters who supported you in the past but are uncertain about supporting you again? Obviously, so what would you say to them? That we've got there are two candidates. So what would you say for people who might have questions for whatever reasons? What would you say to them, to those folks?
Without knowing exactly what has sort of changed their mind, I wouldn't be able to say directly. But I guess what I would say is that I think that the record of our administration, the job we've done, the historically low crime rates we've achieved, the level at which we are engaging with community like never before. The innovation in the diversion programs, robust diversion programs that we are utilizing at this point have been very effective. And we're going to continue to think outside the box, continue to think strategically, continue to think in a holistic way, making sure that we're doing everything we can to achieve justice within a modern prosecutor's office. Things how prosecutors do their work now is much different than it was many, many years ago. It's different from when I was a young assistant district attorney, right? Again, our focus and my belief and hope is that we continue to engage in a way where we are addressing recidivism. So our emerging adult program is pretty innovative, but it's designed to reduce recidivism. It's designed to hopefully prevent that young person, not a kid, but a young adult, from reoffending, from continuing to compile more offenses in a criminal record that could ultimately hinder them. We always want to minimize the harm that our criminal legal system can visit upon individuals, while also recognizing, and it's a difficult job to do, is that we make difficult decisions, while also recognizing that there is accountability that has to take place, and there are times where accountability measures in traditional prosecution are necessary. That's a balancing act we're constantly engaging in. So I would want our voters to know that we're going to continue to do that work. We're going to continue to have the courage and the fortitude to do so, but the compassion as well. Compassion's actually not a dirty word within the area of prosecution. At least it shouldn't be, right? We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
Indeed.
Amen.
Amen.
And so we have to always remember that. We have to always remember the human factor that is involved in every single case, and every single case is different, and so those human factors vary as well.
Mhm.
In a case where you have a victim, you have witnesses that were involved. Those witnesses
Mhm.
may be just, oh, I saw what happened and I was unfazed by it, or I saw what was happening and I'm traumatized by it and I need a lot of help as well, right?
Mhm.
You have a community that's been impacted as well. One of the innovative concepts that was addressed to me recently by someone was the notion of finding better ways to allow for and have community impact statements when
Mhm.
cases are resolved, so that courts and judges, when they get time to make a decision, understands how the community was impacted.
Mhm.
That's actually something that I'm going to be looking at in the next term, and then
Mhm.
there may actually be some legislation proffered in that respect. We'll see how that goes. So,
Mhm.
community impact statements, but at the end of the day, it's continuing to do the job in a way that's fair, that's just, that
Mhm.
treats people right,
Mhm.
that holds people accountable. I don't have a heaven or hell to send anybody to. I don't have any condemnation for anybody. But I do have, and others do as well. Um, and it's not just those within the criminal legal system. Pastors have to do it too. Mothers and fathers have to do it. Um, you Sometimes you have to hold people accountable for actions.
Mhm.
That doesn't make them a bad person.
Mhm.
It just means that the action that they took is what was where the accountability is required and necessary. So that hopefully it doesn't happen again. And again, once you get into that sort of realm of what I just talked about, if you're not thinking about reducing recidivism, then you're going to probably fall short. So that's what we're continuing to focus on.
I love that. I'm gonna real quickly interject. You talked about. I love that you said that we've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God, right? And it goes on to say, "It's but by His mercy that we're not consumed," right? On
Mm-hmm.
our best day, right?
Mm-hmm.
With that said, I'm curious if you could just speak a little bit because we often talk about criminal reform, and so you think everyone is uh, rehabilitatable, right? There's reform, there's redemption for everyone, right? So with that said, people often are particularly damning and think that people are throwaways
Mm-hmm.
who are sex offenders. And I
Mm-hmm.
always have to advocate for this population that, again, but by the grace of God. And it could be something, I mean, the spectrum, you can, you could, have to relieve yourself
Mm-hmm.
in a place that could be a charge,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, people don't understand the spectrum
Yeah.
of sex offenders,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there's just this scarlet letter. And even if a person was a person that made a poor choice and some of them appeared to be overage, presented themselves as such, but were not.
Right.
And in fact, so I really want you to talk about the compassion and the restorative perspective that your office would be able to give those whom might have found themselves in that position with that offense.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to harken back to a time at the Sex Offender Registry Board for purposes of answering part of this question, because we had to address that head on as an agency, but also um, frankly were ordered to do so by the court,
Sure.
right? So the Sex Offender Registry Board is going to classify someone convicted of a sex offense as a level 1, 2, or 3,
Okay.
um, and that has been going on for as long as, at least in Massachusetts. Other areas of the country are drastically different
Oh, really?
and far more punitive than Massachusetts
Okay.
is. But that classification level in Massachusetts is the way it's been, I think, pretty much from the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one distinction that changed was there was a period of time where level 2 sex offenders were not available on the internet, are now available on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was at the Sex Offender Registry Board, um, there were two factors at play. One was that the risk factors, the promulgated risk factors that we looked at to consider based on science, based on expertise,
Mm-hmm.
that determine what someone's risk of reoffense and degree of danger um, was outdated. So we had to update those regulations. When I arrived there and when I became the chair, I got a call from then Governor Deval Patrick, who said, "Can you do this?" And I said, "Yes, I can." And he said, "Can you do it within X amount of time. I said, it's probably going to take a little longer than that, but I'll get it done. And we did. We
Wow.
delivered. So we had to revamp our regulations to be more in keeping with the science. But then later on, we had to um, rectify a backlog in terms of individuals that are looking to be reclassified,
Mhm.
meaning that, and that's a right that they have
Mhm.
to petition to
Sure.
be reclassified,
Sure.
because there are a variety of different factors that will lower someone's risk of reoffense and degree of danger, right?
Yes.
So depending on the application of certain factors over times, you could be, instead of being a level 3, you could be a level 2.
Mhm.
We had to go through that process. It's the right thing to do,
Yes.
because overclassification provides unjust results, right?
Mhm.
And I've had many conversations both while I was at the Sex Offender Registry Board, and since then out in the DA's office with the Pine Street Inn. So the Pine Street Inn is a very close partner with us around a number of different things. Our homelessness court
Mm.
is run out of the Pine Street Inn.
Mhm.
The Pine Street Inn grapples with this all the time.
Sure.
They don't want to have someone down and out and cold and on the street, but they're not allowed to have level 3 sex offenders
Mhm.
in their building, right? So if the sex offender registry board is not properly classifying people and make everyone a level 3,
Mhm.
then people who are already having a challenge may not
Mhm.
be able to get what they need.
Mhm.
So that's something we have to always be sensitive to. On the flip side, we also have to recognize as prosecutors at the front end
Mhm.
dealing with these cases, and
Mhm.
our survivors and our witnesses and our
Absolutely.
victims of
Of
sexual
course.
assault often feel so unnoticed within our system.
Mhm.
um,
Sure.
we actually always have to be mindful
Of
of that as
course.
well.
Of course.
So it's a balancing act, and
Mhm.
just like but when it comes to accountability and sentencing, just like every other case, you've got to evaluate the nature and circumstances of the offense.
Mhm.
You have to evaluate the harm that's been caused, the victim input, um, uh, someone's past criminal history, all
Mhm.
these things to determine what an appropriate sentence is. Um, but everyone's redeemable.
I
I, I
appreciate
I
that.
hon- I honestly believe that, and I think that's, you'll get Mattis Robinson in the decision by the Supreme Judicial Court, which says that under people under 20 years of age can no longer serve life sentences without parole. Right? It's unconstitutional. That is another indication of how we as a society and as a criminal legal system have evolved, and again, that word compassion, have become more compassionate, right?
And the science, right? You about to the science, right? The science says your brain's not fully formed till you're 25, right? So impulsivity, right? Those kind of things that you be, you know, sentenced for life. So I appreciate that it's evolving, and the science is the thing that drives that.
Yeah.
So we're winding down time really quick. I want to ask you with regard to people being engaged and people who are incarcerated right now in Massachusetts. You're obviously aware that up until 2000, people could vote regardless of their conviction status. And they were stripped, people serving felony convictions were stripped of the right to participate in democracy, right? And there's legislation, Senate Bill 524, that's sitting in the Ways and Means right now that will restore the rights for thousands of people to vote in presidential elections and municipal elections who are serving felony convictions. So this is just, what is your position on universal voting rights and people who are serving felony convictions? Should they be restored the right that was stripped from them in 2000? Quite candidly, because people who are at MCI Norfolk were mobilizing, organizing, and courting elected officials and having programs that were rehabilitative. And now, since that's been stripped from them, they're not having those programs, and people aren't courting them as elected officials because they don't have a vote.
I've met some of those men. I've spent time with some of those men behind the walls, done healing circles with them, and um, a number of interactions. I believe that they should be able to participate in our political process, and I believe that that'll be restored, hopefully.
Thank you for that. Lastly, with a few moments left, speak to the camera, speak to the mic, speak to the people who will go to the polls on September 1st and tell them why they should cast their precious franchise to keep you as the district attorney of the
Yeah.
Suffolk County.
Well, first of all, recognize this. It's September 1st. That's early. It can't, in fact, it can't legally be any earlier. The first Tuesday in September happens to be on September 1st. That doesn't happen very often. Usually, that Tuesday voting in September is on the Tuesday after Labor Day. People need to remember this is before Labor Day, so it's going to sneak up on you. Up and down the ballot, there are some important votes taking place. And they start with the primaries. Some continue into November, others don't. The Suffolk DA's race does not continue into November under the current scheme because you have 3 Democrats on the ballot. So
whomever,
if there was a Republican or an independent, that would be different. But
that's important.
Whoever wins goes on to November on the ballot by themselves. So September is an important date. And I believe that September 1st in Suffolk County for the district attorney's race is a vitally, vitally important date because do we want to continue to operate under the leadership of a DA who believes strongly that you can do criminal legal reform and keep the public safe at the same time? Do we want to continue with a DA that has helped bring us to historically low crime rates across every category? Do we want to elect a DA that will continue doing the things around, for example, safe shopping initiative? I mean, we had reached a point where retail theft was off the charts, and it wasn't just that there was retail theft going on. As you got to the point where both employees and people and patrons of stores are saying, "I don't feel safe